begin our PowerPoint um, with topic 1.1, Introduction to Ecosystems. You can find this information in Chapter 6, Module 20. And these are our learning objectives for this particular topic. This is directly from the College Board, so please go ahead and review them on your own. So there are all kinds of species interactions. There can be interactions that are negative for both individuals involved. There can be one individual has a positive effect and one is negative, while others can remain neutral. So there are all different kinds of species interactions, and we're going to go over them now. So first off, we have competition. So competition is when two organisms either want or need the same resource, like food, shelter, water, territory, or even space. And so obviously that's not good for either one than if they were able to get it on their own without the competition. So one may be a better competitor, but each has to work a little harder. So they actually have to exert more energy to get to that. There are a couple different kinds of competition. Intra-specific is between the same the species, individuals of the same species, and interspecific is between two different species. And so, what resource they're after all depends, on the species and what they need. So it could be food, it could be a mate, it could be space. There's also interference competition. And so interference competition is where an individual is actually preventing the other from getting access. So it's not actually using resource, but it's actually blocking them from getting to it. It's like if you wanted to get into the room and I interfered from you getting into the room by me standing in the door. Whereas like exploitation is where I'm using the resource first before the other can get to it. So I'm actually exploiting the resource, and that means none for you. And so to reduce competitions, organisms have kind of evolved different ways of dealing with it. And so we call this resource partitioning. So you're actually splitting up the resource into parts. And so we're reducing competition, and in result, what ends up is that you're reducing your niches, you're becoming more specialized. And so there are a few different kinds of resource partitioning. There's temporal resource partitioning, where organisms are actually going after the resource at different times of the day. So, for example, the picture up here is a coyote and a wolf. So they may be predating on the same prey species, but they're doing it at different times of the day. Whereas spatial resource partitioning is that different organisms are actually looking for their resources in different areas, so in space. And finally, morphological means a different body shape and size. So perfect example is Darwin's finches. You can tell that in their beak size, they are going for different resources, so they partition themselves in that way. So predation is another form of species interaction. So one organism actually kills and eats another. And so usually it involves a predator hunting for prey. And so it could be a single predator or even a group of predators together. So like the African hunting dog is the perfect example of a group predator. If you haven't watched Planet Earth, you should definitely look at the series on African hunting dogs that they have. It's super cool. And so in predation, there's either like a pursuit predation, it takes a lot of energy, or an ambush where you're actually, taking your prey by surprise. And prey have all kinds of defenses. So like run away, obviously, be able to, sense the presence of the predator, have protective shells or bark, thorns so that the predators won't predate on them, camouflage, mimicry, right? There are all kinds of things that prey can do to actually, avoid getting eaten. And so here's some of those organisms. So for example, right, we have this toxic frog, eat me and you'll die. An armadillo, very hard shell, hard to get to. Skunk, doesn't smell so good, right? And here, like, can you find the insect in this photo, right? So there's camouflage. Um, and it could be warning coloration or it could be mimicry depending on the organism. So, for example, a coral snake here on the left is actually venomous, whereas a king snake is non-venomous. So this would be a warning coloration, like "Don't eat me, I'm venomous," whereas the king snake is non-venomous, but it's mimicking the coral snake. So predators will think it's the wrong one and not eat it. And so the same with the monarch and the viceroy butterfly. So the viceroy actually tastes delicious to predators, and the monarch butterfly doesn't, but they look very similar. So, if it were me, I'd be like, oh, I'm not sure about that one. You know what? I'm not going to eat it. So another form of species interaction is parasitism, where one organism is living off the other, so usually on or in a host, but it can also be a behavioral parasitism. And so most parasites can eventually kill the host indirectly by actually depriving them of nutrients. So here you see a tick, they're sucking on your blood, or like a tapeworm that will ultimately pull the nutrients, from your body. Commensalism is where one organism lives in close association with another. So one organism will benefit, but the other doesn't really care either way. So here you see there's actually a remora suctioned onto the shark. Well, the shark doesn't really care that it's like hitchhiking. All of the pieces from its meal can actually come back to the remora, and the remora gets a free meal that way. So, remora's happy, shark doesn't care. There's mutualism, where both organisms are benefiting from the interaction. So, although the benefits may differ in like value, whether they're better or whatever, it may just be different. Like this rhino here is happily munching away while these birds pick the insects off him, and so he gets rid of his parasites, and the birds get a free meal. Both are happy. And so, symbiosis is an umbrella term given for an interaction where one species benefits, or at least one species benefits. So, in all the things that we have talked about today, parasitism, commensalism, and mutualism are all organisms that undergo symbiosis. Whereas, competition, neither organism is actually benefiting because, like I said, it's they would be better off without the other organism. So this is one of my favorite examples is in algae have a symbiotic um, algae called zooxanthellae, and so the zooxanthellae are photosynthetic organisms that feed the algae, and the algae provide them a home. I'm sorry, the coral provide them a home. And so it's one of my favorite mutualisms because they both benefit. And I will leave you with that happy thought.